What's happening? Will Freeman, Revolutionary Lifestyle Design, coming at you today to talk about what I've learned from a decade of entrepreneurship. So, without further ado, I've been an entrepreneur in one form or the other for the past decade. I've made six figures in both as a pro trader and in corporate sales. I've started, I think, six businesses. I've got a lot of experience in terms of making money, and I've had some successes. I've also had a ton of failures, made a ton of mistakes. And basically in this video, I want to give you my knowledge so that one, you don't make the same mistakes. And what I really want to do is I want to be able to take a decade off your learning curve, let me have failed for you, made the mistakes for you so that you don't have to, and so that you can avoid the 90% failure rate of most businesses. I failed in a lot of businesses, and I can tell you it's really not fun, and I want you to be able to avoid that. So with that said, the majority of this advice is not for guys trying to build the next Facebook, okay? The majority of my stuff, both in entrepreneurship and in all the other stuff I do on RLD, is for guys who are 18 to 35, your average guy, and who want to get out of the rat race and want to build your own business, okay? My goal is to get you to six figures a year, or the developing world equivalent, which over here in Southeast Asia is about $4,000 a month or 40 grand a year. And after that, you can decide where you want to go, okay? You can decide your own path after that. I want to get you to six figures. I want you to not make the same mistakes that I've made, and I want to make sure that ideally your first business or the business you're working on is a success. Okay, so if you do want to build the next great tech startup, you want to build a $40 million business, I have included some advice for you based on my experience with my tech startup. Okay, that failed, but there is still some advice there. But with that said, that advice is for the truly exceptional guy. Okay, and I'll define exceptional later on in this video. For most guys, however, building that tech startup is not the right move, for myself included. Okay, I'm including myself in that, in that I'm not exceptional enough to build that $40 million tech business. Okay, and if you are exceptional and you do want to build that $100 million tech business, I suggest you keep the advice in mind that I'm going to break down for you in the video. But you're going to have to look to guys who have succeeded on that level to give you the roadmap. The venture capitalist blogs, the Silicon Valley blogs, the types of books written by those guys is where you're gonna have to look for that, because I can't take you there. But I do have some advice for you if you are exceptional, and I'm also gonna give you the criteria to see if you are that exceptional guy, because believe me, thinking that you're exceptional in that area and going into that business can cost you 2 or 3 years of your life if you're not, all right? So that's an important thing to understand. So without further ado, to succeed in business, the first thing you need to know is what to expect, okay? What to expect. And to start on what to expect building a profitable business to be the hardest thing that you've ever done, okay? You don't know what hard work is until you've built a profitable business. You think you do, but you don't. The only comparison I have to actually building and succeeding in business was working in corporate sales. Succeeding in sales is very difficult. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of stress. That's the only equivalent that I know of. But whether it's succeeding in sales or building your first profitable business, it's going to be the hardest thing that you've done with your life. Okay, so forget all that entrepreneur porn that you read. They tell you it's hard, but you really don't know how hard it's going to be. Okay, school and regular jobs are a joke in comparison. Getting in shape doesn't compare. Getting girls doesn't compare. Do not let the entrepreneur porn fool you. Building a winning business is way harder than you think. Even if you think it's going to be hard, even if you have conservative estimates, it's going to be 10 times. You're going to have to put in 10 times more work than you think you're going to do. Okay, let's say you want to succeed in real estate. 90% of people fail in real estate because they think that 4 calls a day is going to get them there. When in reality, for your first year or two, you should be looking at doing 400 calls a day, all right? 400 calls a day plus advertising, plus servicing your clients, plus learning the hell out of your industry is what you need to be doing, okay? And don't think, 400 calls a day, that's so much. I did 400 calls a day in a minimum wage call center with like a $3 bonus per close, on a 6-hour shift when I needed money. Okay, you can do 400 calls a day on your real estate business. You can just get the phone book out and just start banging out leads out of the phone book, right? Or you can tailor into the leads or whatever. But I mean, expect to be putting in that work. I mean, I get emails from guys like, Will, I started a service business. It's been 2 months. It's hard. I'm thinking of quit. I was like, dude, man, give it 2 years and not be making 5 calls a day, making 300-400 calls a day and emails and all that stuff. All right. So don't get me wrong. It gets way, way easier. Like now I'm 5 years into RLD. I cannot do any work for 3 months and I'll still be making the same amount of money every month because of all the passive income I built. But that comes after years of work and experience. Okay. So expect a tough grind for the first 2 years. That's going to stretch you to your limits and beyond your limits. What not to do. Okay, so now you know what to expect. I'm going to tell you what not to do. The first thing you do is you don't go into debt for your business. You don't go into debt for anything. It's just not good. The only good kind of debt is if you're a CEO of a billion-dollar corporation and you can borrow as much as you want because you don't have to pay it back and you're not liable for it and you're still going to take home your $30 million bonus that year. Okay, for the small business owner, don't do it. I mean, I hear about guys going 100K into debt for a Subway franchise that might earn you 15%. It's going to take you, 6 months to a year to market. You're going to hope that you found the right location. If you didn't find the right location, all the advertising in the world is not going to get you business. It's going to be over. You're going to be 100 grand down and you're going to have to keep putting money into that every month. I mean, just say no to debt. Instead, save your money, master your skill, learn how to sell, and throw it all into a low overhead, low expense business, at least for your first business, okay? Next point on what not to do is don't start a business with high upfront costs. So in this day and age, bricks and mortar or franchise style business, as I said before, Subway style or opening McDonald's, whatever, to me are definitely a no. But you probably know that if you've been reading entrepreneur stuff. You might be looking at drop shipping, either through your site or through Amazon FBA or eBay or AliExpress. I know guys making money in all those different areas. I know a guy made a ton of money in AliExpress, Brian from losertowinner.com. But it's important to understand the cost before you jump in, okay? So I took a shot at Amazon FBA. It took us about $4,000 to get to markets, 3 months to get there, and then no one wanted our product. Because by the time we got in there, our store was cannibalized by a bunch of other FBA drop shippers who weren't there when we first found the niche. So for most Amazon FBA stores, you're looking at 2 to 3 shots to build a successful store, especially if you're not particularly business savvy, if you haven't been an entrepreneur for too long. So you're really going to be looking at like $12,000 and 6 to 8 months of your time because your first 2 stores probably aren't going to work. Okay, so you're looking at $12,000 and AliExpress. Okay, if you want to drop ship on AliExpress, you got to put a lot of money into the Facebook ads. You're looking at $3,000 to $15,000 of upfront advertising before you even find out if you found a winner. And you might not find a winner, so you might drop $15,000 on $4,000 on one product, another $4,000 on another product, another $4,000 on another product, and none of them hit, and you're $15,000 down. All right, that's just, you got to know those costs up front, and neither of those are a lot of money up front if you're rich, okay? But if you don't have a lot of money, $12,000 is a lot of money, especially if you're just starting out in business. And that could have taken you a couple of years to save up that money depending on what kind of job you have. And then when you invest in a business like that and you lose all your money, now you got to go back to the corporate world for another 2 years, stack your cash, build a new business. The opportunity cost is like 2 years. I mean, the time cost, all kinds of things can really hurt you there when you don't succeed on your first business. That's why I think a service-based business is better because there's very low overhead costs, just basically internet and phone connection. And you can take shots on the e-commerce business once you've built a 6-figure service-based business, right? You can just take out, you're making $10,000 a month, you can take $4,000 out a month, get someone else to do a lot of the grinding for you and take a shot that way. Especially true if you're geo-arbitraging your income. So you've got a service business, but you're living in Asia, and now $10,000 a month is worth the equivalent of $30,000 a month in the West, right? So that's one thing you got to keep in mind. So definitely no for the big, $100,000 investment businesses. Maybe for the e-com, but again, if you don't have a lot of money, when you're looking at 10 to 15K, that might not be your best move for your first business. But we're going to get into a little bit about the e-com and what I think is your best starter business as we go on. The next point on what not to do is don't get into businesses you're not passionate about. This is very important. I gave Amazon FBA and AliExpress dropshipping a go. They failed for a number of reasons. I did this while I was still working on RLD. This was in the last couple of years. One big factor was that I hated both businesses. If I enjoyed it, I would have gone back to it a few times, probably hit a winner, but I hate e-commerce. I hate selling products that I don't care about. And I have a business, I have RLD as my mission, and any time away from that, I felt like I was cheating on my wife, right? RLD, revolutionarylifestyledesign.com, is my wife, it's my baby. And I felt like, man, why am I spending time on this? I should have just released another book or done a video course. And my heart just wasn't in it. So that's a really important thing to understand. If you're not passionate about what you do, it's going to be very hard to find the motivation, and you're also not going to be happy with it. Some guys love e-commerce. My man Josh loves e-commerce, but I don't. And if you want to be unhappy and do something you have no passion for, you might as well just work a job. That's my take on it. If you're passionate about e-commerce, then it's a totally different story. Or whatever it is, just make sure that whatever you're doing, you're enjoying what you're doing, because you're going to be doing that 8 to 10 hours a day, 7 days a week for at least the first couple of years. The next point, and it's kind of similar to the last point, is don't start more than one business at a time. With maybe an exception of like, okay, you built the service-based business up over 3 years, and then you can take the shot with the e-com, but you're paying some guy to do 90% of the work, and you're splitting it 50-50. You're the money partner, he's the grinding partner type thing. But for me, I can't do more than one thing at a time. If I try to, the second thing will suffer. In most cases, if you're trying to run 3 businesses, it means that you're not sure about your first business. Okay, so instead of putting all these mediocre ideas out there, you should be doubling down on the best idea instead of trying to do all these hustles, because doing that's going to burn you out. The only time you can have more than one business is when you're rich and you can afford people to pay people to do the grunt work. When you're doing 3 businesses, the stuff that burns you out is when you're trying to do like technical problems, data entry, grinding, finding like really boring solutions to boring problems. Okay, if you're P. Diddy, it's easy. He can have the Ciroc vodka, he can have Bad Boy, he can have television shows, because he just pays people to do all the grunt work. He just does the high level fun meetings, and then he just tells everyone else what to do. Okay, that's a totally different story. You can be involved in all kinds of projects like that, but when you're small and you're starting out, and you're involved and you don't have a lot of cash and you're involved in the grunt work for all those businesses, I don't suggest starting more than one business at a time until you can get rich and pay people to do the grunt work for you. All right. Next point on what not to do is don't partner with the wrong person, if anybody. Okay. I started my first business was a Vice magazine clone that folded because my partner wanted out. And I was dumb enough to let him buy the domain and keep it in his name. And then he was supposed to do the tech work. He didn't do anything. I basically had to learn it all, and I learned how to do WordPress magazine, which really helped me when I did RLD, but he was doing none of that. He wasn't doing anything that he's supposed to. He told me he wanted to be creative director and just contribute ideas occasionally without doing any work. He was super negative. And eventually he wanted out, and he said, okay, I'm taking the site down. If you want to, you're going to pay me for the time that I put in. Okay, none of us were making money at the business. And he tried to ransom the domain back to me. In my tech business, our developer partner went MIA 9 or 10 times. Eventually he went no contact. And because he was such a rock star developer, we couldn't do anything with his code because no one was smart enough to be able to figure out what he was doing. And our business was finished. In that same business, the reason that the other partner brought me on board with that tech business is because he was funding everything, and his partner stole, not the developer, the other partner stole $40,000 of his money that was supposed to be going to the business that he was using to take girls out for dinner. Okay, insane stuff, right? I mean, you really think you know people, but people are funny around money, and you don't know someone until you're in business with them. And you got to be very, very careful about who you get into business. There's maybe 3 or 4 guys that I know that I would consider doing business with. Okay, and most of those guys I've known for at least 2 years. They say don't do business with your friends, but in reality, you have to do business with your friends, because you have to get to know a guy for 2, 3, 4 years to make sure that he's a solid, trustworthy guy. If you meet a guy at a networking group or whatever, and you're starting a business with him a week later, you don't know who you're getting into bed with, all right? And some bad things can happen. So it's important to understand. Speaking of, to add to that point, don't waste your time networking, okay? No one at networking events has any money. You don't know the majority of the guys that I found are not, they're not my kind of guys. I mean, the last thing, okay, if a guy has money, he's not going to networking conferences and getting swarmed by a bunch of broke entrepreneurs, okay? Instead, you spend your time building a business that makes money. Like, I'm out here in Thailand, there's all kinds of these digital nomad conferences and guys talking about e-commerce or building a blog. If I go to those conferences and I tell them about my blog or my personal brand, okay, I got 100,000 visitors a month, or 150,000 on RLD, another 400,000 views on RLD, another 400,000 or 100,000 views a month on YouTube. I need a guy who's making 500,000, getting 500,000 monthly visits for me to be able to learn something from him. So the majority of the time, if I'm going to that conference, it's a bunch of guys trying to get information off me. Same thing for the investor who's got a lot of money. It's just a bunch of guys who want his money. The last thing he wants to do is get hounded by those dudes, right? And at those types of things, you'll also meet a lot of guys that I call fantasy businessmen. Okay, they're guys who dress up like businessmen. They speak in buzzwords, but they either don't execute or have delusional expectations. There's a ton of those guys, a ton of entrepreneurs out there. And if you're doing tech business, you'll see them at networking events, at startup drinks, at entrepreneur meetings, at meetup groups, at seminars, at digital nomad meetings, and everywhere in between. And back in the day when I still used to have those conversations, I'd meet so many guys and we'd get hyped up on all these ideas, and then nothing would come to it because they weren't executing, or I could tell that their expectations weren't in line with reality. They didn't know how much work really needed to be done, and just a waste of time. Okay, we had one guy at my tech accelerator who was a trust fund guy. He was in his 40s. He'd been there for 2 years. He had no revenue, and every meeting he would talk about how he's going to get the client of Japan on board for his business. He was like, when I get Japan on board for this, everything's going to change. Literally, the country of Japan was what he was selling to other people. Of like, this is what's, my business is going to be built on this. Like, he had no revenue for 2 years. Like, crazy stuff. Okay. Next point is if you can, avoid starting a business where you need to manage people. Okay. We'll get into the tech business, and if you're exceptional, because that is going to be management. But for most of you guys in the service-based business that I recommend, it's like 90% of your headaches come from managing people. I'm a sole proprietor here at RLD. If I want something done, I just find a guy on Elance, or I find one of my friends. I use Matt Lawrence for my book covers, and I just pay them to do it. Okay, I don't have to manage anyone. I was like, here, this is what I want you to do. Come back to me when it's done, and I'll pay. All right. 90% of business stress comes from managing people. I managed people when I was in sales. It was a nightmare. I'm responsible for all their targets. Then, data and metrics are predictable, but people aren't. People are not reliable or accountable on average. And then you've got the headaches, the responsibility, and even more than that, if you're a new business, now you've got payroll to meet every month, okay? For yourself, it's different. You can live on, when you're building a business, you can baseline it and you can live on, chicken and rice for 6 months if you have to. But your employee's not going to want to live on that, right? He's not going to stick around. So now you got payroll to meet, and that just adds a totally another level of stress on top of something that's already stressful, which is starting a business. So, I recommend, at least for your first business, for your startup business, the sole proprietorship way is the way to go. If you want something done, pay people on contract for it to do it. And you can always add more people into the equation when you have a lot more money. But ideally, what you'd want to do, and what I'll do as I scale up, is I'll just get someone to manage. I'll still have the contractors, but then you just get some guy that you trust to manage all the contractors. He deals with all the headaches. You pay him to deal with the headaches. He sends you a weekly report of what's going on. That's a much preferable model for me than getting everyone in an office and having to manage 10 people and payroll and all of this mess. Okay. Next point on what not to do, don't get into a business with an informational disadvantage. Okay, this is something that I learned from the tech business. As I mentioned before, I was in business with me, my buddy Zach, and this kid who was a rock star developer. And even though we were paying the guy a living wage, not taking anything for ourselves, this kid was still doing like 2 or 3 hour work days. He was totally unreliable. He would go MIA all the time, but no one else could do what he did. Okay. You can't just find another rockstar developer. You can't just find another programmer that's at that high level. This kid could literally build anything. He's a genius. And so we had to coax him back, like, hey man, you come back. We couldn't, go hard on him because he would just run off. And, it was a total mess. And then when he finally went totally MIA, our business was finished because no one else could figure out his code. No one else could do anything with what he was doing because he was just on such another level. And neither Zach and I could program at all. And we were just in such a massive informational disadvantage. And after that blew up, I told myself, I'll never be in a business where I don't know exactly how everything works. So if there's a problem, if I choose to partner with someone, which again is a dangerous thing to do, I can do everything, right? So I can hire a bunch of people for RLD, or I can hire a guy to manage RLD and manage my contractors or whatever. But if there's any problem with him or the contractors, I can do every single thing for RLD. I can do the majority of the technical work. I can do the video, the SEO, the marketing, the Facebook, everything, okay? And that's the position I want to be in. The only time if there's going to be an informational disadvantage in a business partnership, you want it to be tilted in your favor. Okay, you want to be the programmer, in business with another guy who's not doing that. Okay, if that's how it's going to go down, you want to always have the advantage on your side, not on someone else's side where they can just leave or not do their work, and you're finished because they have that informational leverage over you. Next point on what not to do is don't start a startup unless you're exceptional, okay? This is what I was talking about earlier in the video. If you want to build a $40 million tech company, great, but you need to be exceptional. And by that I mean hard metric, exceptional, quantifiable, measurable intelligence. Just because you're a smart guy and a hard worker is not good enough. I feel like I'm a smart guy. I know I'm a very hard worker. You might be a very smart guy and a hard worker, but that's not enough, okay? You need 150 IQ and to be a rockstar developer. The kid that I'm talking about who went MIA and who had no work ethic, that guy was exceptional. He should be worth, $40 million, but he's not. After he left us, I heard he went to another job and got fired because he wasn't doing work. I mean, he took a job making $70,000 a year when he should be in business making, $700,000 a year at least, because he's a literal genius. He could build the next Facebook. That kid could build anything. I really saw when I was watching him, I saw up close what exceptional looks like, at least in terms of tech. And I really realized that I didn't have it. And neither did Zach. Both of us are high IQ guys. I'm exceptional in sales, and so is Zach. And our business acumen is pretty good, but neither of us could program a microwave. And it was like, I realized there's no way I should be in tech when I'm competing with guys who are exceptional, right? Okay, you take a guy like Mark Zuckerberg, he's super exceptional in intelligence, super exceptional in business acumen, and super intelligent in sales. I mean, he sold his way into major VC partnerships. And I mean, that's who you're competing with in tech, and I've just got no business competing with a guy like that, and I know it. So that's something that you really, really have to take into consideration. If I'm talking to you and you got 150 IQ and you've got insane level programming, all bets are off, man. Go give it a shot at tech business. But if not, man, I think it's a mistake to get into it. Next point on what not to do. It says, if you choose to do a startup, okay, if you are exceptional, don't join an accelerator. An accelerator, if you don't know, is a collective of successful entrepreneurs and basically help launch your company for a percentage of your corporation, okay? And it sounds like a win-win proposition, but in practice, it's a bit different. So our accelerator didn't do a whole lot for us except introduce us to some VCs and potential mentors, all of who we could have met through cold calling and FaceTime. But in hindsight, we wouldn't have even bothered because they did not care about us until we had traction. And I hated working in the accelerator because the owner would come around and try and talk to us as if we were his employees and asking about sales and our sales targets. And he would try and push us to pitch these VCs after we figured it out. Like, they don't care unless we have hockey stick traction. And then he would bring someone into the office and put on this whole dog and pony show, and he would get all the companies to meet him in this giant meeting every day for, it took 2 hours out of our time, that we were trying to work on to build our revenue, wasting time with some guy that's going to go nowhere so the owner can look good in front of, whoever VC or some mentor or some dude that he's bringing in that didn't give a fuck about our company. Okay. And so all that messing around was costing us 2 hours a day. I hated the guy's attitude, and not to mention the fact that they took like 10% of the company without investing money into it. That was a big thing. Now, this was in Toronto, okay? This isn't Silicon Valley. And Toronto had some more prestigious accelerators. This wasn't a particularly prestigious one, but I heard from a lot of the other companies working there that it was better, but it wasn't a whole lot better, okay? With that said, there's a big exception. Because I can only speak from Toronto. If your company is able to get into one of those big Silicon Valley accelerators like Y Combinator, totally different story, okay? You should be, breaking your neck to get into that thing. And believe me, we tried to get into Y Combinator, but they didn't, our business wasn't nearly valuable enough for them. A place like Y Combinator, run by like former Silicon Valley guys, super useful because one, they give you money for a percentage of your company, and two, you've got a ton of useful advice and connections from guys who are actually successful, really successful, and a ton of successful companies have come out of that. So that's the only exception. If you can get into one of those top 10 accelerators, or maybe even top 30 if you're talking about in Silicon Valley. But in my experience, at least outside of Silicon Valley, in just a major city, with an accelerator that's not huge, it's even some of the more prestigious ones, it's not worth your time. All right, so that's it on what not to do. Now I want to talk about how to get started. All right, so starting the right business, that's key. As I briefly mentioned before, my first two businesses were online magazines. The first one was a Vice magazine clone. Okay, I'm not talking about Vice magazine now. I'm talking about Vice magazine back when I was growing up, and it was starting out in Montreal, and it was super edgy, and like they were just writing about crazy shit. It was really fun, and I tried to do that. And the other one I did was a fashion mag, and basically in this day and age, most online magazines and newspapers are just hemorrhaging money. I mean, even like the New York Times and all the big ones are getting smoked. And I thought I had figured out a model because I was getting people to write for me for free. Again, I can sell, so I was getting people that I knew or girls that I'd seen or girls that I had dated before who were writers to write for me. And I was, I had like 15 people writing for me for free. But the quality wasn't quite there, of course, when you're getting free content, and neither was the accountability because, again, they're doing it for free. Not that I blame them. In hindsight, now I don't accept anything for free. I want people who want to get paid and who are serious, and then when I pay someone, I can tell them what to do. When you're getting someone for free, it's like you can't really go too hard on someone because they're doing it for free. And the only companies that are still thriving and growing are companies that have huge backers and are willing to take a loss for a while, or like boring business-to-business publications where they're selling overpriced ad space, $30,000 a month ad space for insurance or financial services companies. Those type of magazines are still running. So in hindsight, two magazines were, totally the wrong business. And that took 3 years out of my life. Not that that was the only thing that I was doing. I was working in sales, and then at night I would go home and work on those. But I mean, I could have been 3 years ahead if I'd started RLD. Instead of RLD from 2012, I could have been doing it for, 2008, right? Next point on how to get started: build a brand, not a hustle. A lot of talk you hear in the entrepreneur world about hustle, 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 hustle. I don't like the word hustler. Okay, I would prefer the word grinding as opposed to hustle. To me, a hustler is a guy who's just looking to make a buck on some kind of hustle, basically. So I say don't be a hustler. I see be a builder. Build a great brand that you're going to be able to work on for a lifetime, ideally, and maybe even give it to your kids. A brand that's going to be paying you 5 years from now for the work that you did today. Like, to really get excited, you need to be able to see the long-term vision of building something great, not some hustle that might be over next month. Like with RLD and doing these videos and the articles since 2012, I'm happy to work on this year. I just did articles and videos. I didn't even release a new product. The majority of the articles and videos I did were not about getting traffic. It was just because I'm just building this brand, and I'm trying to get all the content that I've been sitting on for the last 4 years out. And I'm happy to do that because my timeline is forever. Like, my timeline is I'm doing this business until I'm dead. So that having that vision makes it so much more enjoyable and so much more exciting and so much more fun. And the great thing is when you have a brand, the work that you're doing now could be paying you for the next decade. So like the bulk of my traffic comes from articles that I wrote 3 years ago. A quarter of my money comes from one book, How to Get Laid on Tinder, that I wrote 3 years ago that took me 3 months to write. Okay, that's still making me a quarter of my income, and it's passive income, and it'll probably go through a couple iterations in the next decade, but it's still going to be making me money for the next decade. I would bet on it, something that I did 3 years ago. Okay, that's incredibly powerful, and that's the power of investing into a brand as opposed to, one hustle here for 3 months, one hustle there, and you never get any of that compound interest and investment back on stuff that you did, or on those, a client that you brought on a decade ago could still be paying you today if you had invested in building a brand instead of just running from one hustle to the other. All right, so think of yourself as a builder of something great. You got a vision, you want to help people, you want to solve problems, you want to create better realities, you want to make people's lives better, you want to add value. Instead of a hustler just like, where can I make a buck? What fucking, hustle can I do to make a buck? You should build a brand and then look at everyone who comes across your brand as a potential lifetime client. Okay, I hope you're gonna buy all my books, and then over the next 40 years, I hope you're gonna buy every book and course and audio and everything that I do. I mean, most guys probably aren't gonna be lifetime customers, but that's how I try and present it. That's how I try and look at everything. Like, let me make everyone that comes to this brand gonna be a lifetime customer, because it's the build and the vision and compound interest, compound investment, all those good things. All right. Next point on getting started is get to market as fast as you can. Okay, that's super important. Get to market as fast as you can. If people don't want your product or service, you don't have a business. All right. When you get to market fast, you fail fast. Without spending a ton of time and money to find out that no one wants your product. Like this guy did when we started our tech business. It took like a year to market, and then no one wanted it. Great. That feels really good. I'll tell you that, guys. You do not want to do that, okay? I also failed slowly in my online magazines. All right, and that sucks too. Even on the Amazon FBA, I failed not slowly, but like mid-speed. It took like 3 months. 3 months to get our product to market. It's not a ton of time, but it's still longer than I would have liked, or at least longer than I'd recommend to you, especially on your first business. Because, 3 months to market isn't a ton of time, but like, let's say you want to do a personal training business. You can go out and get a client tomorrow. You can go out and sell somebody tomorrow. Like, in a service-based business, you can have a client before you even start your business, right? You can test the waters before you invest any money, being like, hey, I'm in great shape. I know a lot about fitness. Let me go out and hit the phones or, hit the gym and find a personal training client. You can start a business. You can have a customer before you even start a business. So you know that you're already in the market, right? as opposed to doing a business where it's like a 2 month, 3 month, or 3 year cycle before you get to market, and then hope and pray that someone wants your product. So that's very important. Getting to market is very important, as quick as you can. Knowing you can have a customer or client is really important, at least on your first business. Again, guys, when you're making 10 or 20K a month on your service business, you can afford to take 4K, give it to another guy to take a shot on an FBA or an AliExpress. But when you're just getting started, it really sucks to fail in your first business and take a loss. It really sets you back. So you got to be careful about that, and try and get the business that can get to market as fast as you can. And to add to that, getting to market is also about knowing that there's already a demand for your product and service, which is my next point. And it's the same thing. It's know there's already demand for your product or service. Okay, and by demand you mean that you already know people want it. Ideally, it's something they need, but want is good enough as long as the market is big enough. Okay, need is better, but want is good enough if it's a big market. And it's not about reinventing the wheel. 9 times out of 10, reinventing the wheel will always cost you money, time, and increase your chances of failure dramatically. For every Facebook, there's 999 businesses that failed trying to reinvent that wheel. Okay. In my accelerator, there were like 10 businesses there, and there were a bunch of businesses before. I don't think any of them succeeded. One business of a guy who was there a year before got bought out for a small amount, which was like $500K for 3 years work, and not a ton of money between 3 guys. And it was really just an aqua hire because they wanted the rockstar developer for that business to come work for their company. All right, so that's an important thing to consider. Know there's already demand for your product and service. Trying to reinvent the wheel 9 times out of 10 is going to cost you a lot of time and money. And so let me give you some examples of businesses that already have a known market and a known demand. Okay, so for offline, selling real estate, insurance, cars, coaching, training, accounting, any blue collar trade, okay, all those have demand. For online, coaching, training, marketing services, web design, webmaster services, copywriting, Airbnb management. My buddy Rye started that a couple months ago. He's already scaled up to $2,000 a month in like 2 months. Okay, all these are proven markets with a ton of money, right? A ton of demand, and those are just a few examples. And if you want to look at how much demand there is, see how many people are working in that market, and see what the top level earners are getting. Like a top level earner in real estate, at least in Toronto, is making $500 to $1 million a year. So you want to see a big market with lots of money, lots of options, lots of guys making a lot of money at the top, so you can say, all right, that guy's making $1 million. Even if I do 10% of what that guy's doing, I'm still doing $100,000. Okay, that's what you want to look at it. Very important to know there's a big demand for your product and service. The next thing to keep in mind is a service business is your best starter business. Okay, again, we're talking about how to get started. So again, I have a blog, I have a personal brand. I don't recommend any of you guys doing that. I've mentioned why in a couple different articles and videos. I would only recommend you doing the personal brand if it's in addition to your service business. So you got a real estate business and you build a website around it, and you've got a few articles here. But doing what I'm doing, truth be told, I got lucky to be able to make a living out of this, and I also had to move to Thailand to really scale it up and all kinds of other things. I recommend you do a service-based business. Okay, if I was 20 in today's climate, that's what I would do. I would learn an in-demand skill, as I mentioned in the last section on knowing demand, and I would learn how to sell, which you can see in my book, How to Sell, over at revolutionarylifestyledesign.com/books. And I would go into business and I would work like a demon possessed for the first 2 years. Again, to see how to do that, check out my book, How to Sell. And that's exactly what I would do. Also, check out my article, How to Start a Service-Based Business, both the YouTube video and on my site, revolutionarylifestyledesign.com. So that is how to get started. That is it for part 1. In part 2, I'm going to tell you how to get and keep clients. I'm also going to show you, I'm going to break down for you getting investment And then I'm going to talk to you about how to handle obstacles. So stay tuned for part 2. And again, check out the article. I'm going to have the link in the YouTube comment section below at revolutionarylifestyledesign.com, because there's a ton of information in this. The article is like 4,000 words. You're going to want to look at the article, maybe save it to your Evernote for referencing it, because there's a lot of content. So I want to make sure that you have that and check it out over at revolutionarylifestyledesign.com. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Again, stay tuned for part 2.